Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the MIT Sloan CIO Summer Dialogues. We've been doing this all summer, and what we're doing is we're selecting speakers from the CIO Symposium and have them return between, well, the symposium and Labor Day. And um, this session is technically part of the Innovator Series, although it's special because this one is public. We want people to be able to get a taste of what it's like to be a member of our Innovator Network. The topic is building the best digital army, and I have with me Vipin Gupta, who I will introduce in just a moment. I would ask that you rename yourselves with your name and your affiliation. This is just to help others identify you. You know, we try to run a community, so that would be courteous. I will say also that this session is public and will be recorded. Um, so if you have any problem with that, I guess message me in the chat. Now we have two more CIO Summer Dialogue sessions. On um, August 19, we have Melissa Swift, and then on August 26, we have Carrie Perlson. And that will um, take care of the CIO Summer Dialogues. Um, Melissa is going to talk about making space to play, leading organizational change in the age of AI, and Carrie is going to talk about trustworthy AI at scale. These two sessions will be limited to the Innovator Network, so I do hope that you join and attend those two. But kicking off the 2026 season, I would also ask that you bookmark the first three Wednesdays in September for partner series events, which will be public like today. Anyway, let's move on to today and our special guest. We have Vipin Gupta, who is the President and Chief Product Officer at FliptRx, and he's also the former Chief Innovation Digital Officer at Toyota Financial Services. I also want to mention that Vipin was one of our 2021, well, he was, I'm sorry, the 2021 winner of the CIO Symposium Leadership Award, and he's since become a member of the organizing team. So I have had the pleasure of working with Vipin since 2021 on a number of different projects for the CIO Symposium and really appreciate him and all that he's doing. And so here's another example. He's here to talk to all of you today. I also want to mention that Vipin has a hard stop at 12:30. So um, hold your questions towards the end of our chat. We will open it up to the audience no later than 12:15. Um, so let's get going. Welcome, Vipin. How are you?
Thank you, Alan. I'm doing really well, and I'm glad that we are doing this. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I'm glad that we made it a public dialogue so that everyone else can benefit from this. So, looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, so let's start with a question where you can set the stage. So you've led a lot of complex digital transformations, and after all, you would have had to in order to become our 2021 winner, right? Um, but this idea in the paper that you sent me about building a digital army is not something that I remember when evaluating your application back in 2021. It feels new to me. So could you just tell us all what it is and where the idea came from?
Yeah, great question, Alan. Yeah, and I think a lot of what you have seen, the success that we got at Toyota Financial Services at the time, and there was just these lot of underlying concepts we never really got a chance to talk about. The how behind the what and the why of the transformation. And this was, I think, one of the pivotal things that happened. And just to set the context for rest of us, you know the story, but for rest of us, we are, if we go back, and this is a little bit of an old story, but highly relevant for, I think, what we are facing today. So back in 2018, when I had joined Toyota Financial Services, Toyota Financial Services has been one of the solid, like one of the largest auto finance companies a solid background, solid history, and financially, they have been really growing year over year for almost 30 years at the time when I joined. So a high performing company, but they were struggling with the transformation of technology or what one calls a digital transformation at the time. So when I joined the team, I started to really, I started wanted to get under that reason why it is happening. And I wanted to go beyond the traditional reasons that we give for failures of digital transformation. Typically, it is the lack of alignment between business IT or lack of alignment between suppliers or bad estimations or all those kinds of typical reasons that are given. So as I started to talk to the team one by one, and I must have spoken to hundreds of people because that's what I was trying to really get to, where how a team that is revered around the world for their engineering, a financial services company that has had a solid growth for years, what is it? What is it that is causing them to not able to deliver on the transformation promise? And as we started to look into it, uh, the bit of a bulb moment was this, that most of the digital transformations we are focused around, I will call it remodeling our business, building a new business model. Then we'll say, okay, let's re-engineer the technology. The third element, which is what I call as behaviors, they get overlooked. And these are the underlying behaviors are the ones that drive a lot of the success around digital transformation. And I think that gets overlooked. The question then was, what are the behaviors that were coming in our way to deliver this transformation? And as we started to peel that, there are many behaviors that we identified. And one behavior, or I would say a combination of two behaviors maybe, was one was, I would call it our behavior around building our mastery in our skills or and how do we become really good domain experts and domain masters. And the second related to that was this idea of consistency of practices. So behaviors, because a typical IT organization or typical organization, most of us have the same kind of organization, there's a large number of our workforce are made up of consultants, the employees coming from different sources they are at different points of time in their career. So we have a very diverse set of workforce. And especially when we have a workforce where we have high number of consultants, which was the case in this case, every consulting organization brings their own practices, right? We have our own practices, they have their own practices, and it becomes like almost every island of practices where everyone thinks that their practices are better than the other ones. And so if you think about the waste that it creates when someone or when teams are applying different practices to achieve the same goal, the variation causes a lot of waste. And if we don't have the team, and team means collective team, where we have enough digital proficiency, where we have enough mastery in understanding our own business, that creates a lot of waste, a lot of back and forth conversation that take place. So that became the kind of underlying aha moment, if you will. Say, okay, what is that we need to do to build this mastery, build the consistency of practices in our organization, such that we can, if we can eliminate that waste, which I call is a multi-million dollar waste. If you really start to translate it, not only it causes failures, causes variation, it causes a lot of emotional anxiety among people. And if we can bring everyone onto this kind of a common set of skills, common proficiency, common set of practices, then how do you kind of bring that culture and build that behavior in the organization? And that's when the next light bulb moment was that um, digital transformation or harnessing the power of software is not just IT's job, it has to be everyone's job. So we can't just solve this problem just within an IT organization, IT department. It has to be solved at the enterprise scale for everyone in the organization. The technologists need to understand the so-called business and the processes. So the role of technologists is not to just build more technology, it is to build better business and more business. Similarly, for business teams or non-technologists need to understand what the IT is. So think about it this way. If you are working for an automotive engineering company or automotive company, as an employee, as a worker of that company, you would want to know and you need to understand the fundamentals, even at a macro level, what that engineering looks like and what does the flow of work is, logistics, supply chain, etc. Now, if you draw that parallel and say every company, especially financial services company, is now a software company, a digital company. That means digital engineering is now our business, whether we like it or not. So if that's the case, then as a member of the financial services company, shouldn't you know how the digital engineering actually works? Because if you know that, then you can harness that power. But the question is, who is going to help everyone understand these nuances, these complexities? On one hand, to the non-technologists, they need to understand the technology and engineering principles. And on the technology side, they need to understand what the business is. And if you can develop that kind of a domain mastery, a bilingual mastery, and then you can create a consistency of practice, that's going to fundamentally change the pace, tone, the texture of transformation. And I think that's what was the origin of this idea, a long way to answer your question. And that's how we ended up with this idea that we are going to build the best digital army because that's an army of people. And that's what's going to drive not transformation one time, but that will make transformation as an ongoing habit that we can repeat and deliver every time successfully.
Yeah, so if I can just summarize a couple of things that I think you said, and perhaps also draw from your paper. You had a nice analogy in the paper about, walking into an auto manufacturing plant and thinking that you know how to tighten a bolt, and everybody, of course, knows how to tighten a bolt, but you need to learn how to tighten it the Toyota way because there's a process of doing that, and that has to be carried forward by everybody who comes into that process. And you're suggesting that same idea persists when you're building teams that are implementing digital skills. Do I have it right?
You're absolutely right. And so in our automotive companies, whether it's in Toyota, absolutely, and every company, before you can go on the assembly line and start working on the cars, we have to all go through a fundamental skills training. So basically, the idea is consistency of practices, consistency of doing things, not only because we want to train people, but it is also because by doing the consistent way, you are reducing the waste, you're reducing all kind of friction and all kind of variations. So think about it this way. In most companies, not just in Toyota, most companies, when a consultant arrives on site, they don't go through the same fundamental skills, right? We expect actually them to be effective the next day immediately. We haven't given them any training about our way of doing how we work. We haven't given them any training about our architecture, our business, our business policies, things like that, right? And if 80 to 90% of your workforce is consulting workforce, that's the amount of workforce that is stretching your crown jewels without any fundamental skills, right? And without that consistency practice, for us to expect them to follow our practice without that kind of some kind of an orientation of that kind is actually unreasonable. It's not going to happen. So what happens is, whether it's a consultant or also new employees, they have to spend first. Typically, some will maybe in 3 to 6 months they will catch up. Some will take 9 to 12 months. But the amount of time it takes for them to just figure it out themselves, we kind of just throw them in the pool and let them figure it out. That has its own merit. But if you combine that with this orientation of fundamental skills, the impact is exponential because
Mm.
everyone is kind of marching on the same beat with the same set of practices.
Yeah, so we're going to get into the details of the proposal in your paper in just a moment. I just want to do one more question to set the stage, and that is, if you go back to the symposium, you gave a very nice talk during the pre-event, and you mentioned the reasons why digital transformations fail. because of a focus on transforming behaviors, which seems to be the core of your thesis that you're going to bring forward today. Can you just give us a couple of examples of behavior gaps that shape this idea of the digital academy that we're going to drill into in a moment?
Yeah, so great question. And so if we continue on this behavior, as I mentioned, mastery, developing mastery. So if you look at it, organizational behavior, do we have a technique set of methods where we help develop the mastery of the domain? Do we have methods and techniques in place that will shape the behaviors to build consistency of practices? But if you go one more layer, if you peel further down, the core of all these waste behaviors was largely centered around two big ideas. One was in the context of most of the waste happens in a cross-functional context. Individually, we may be doing it right. It's the cross-functional elements where most of the waste and the function, and I would call it fumble happens, which is what creates this multi-billion dollar kind of waste over the years. And the second piece is, um, uh, and the reason that happens, if you take it down one more layer down, is because we don't really see an enterprise as one thing. We all operate as if my project, my product, my project, my department in that context, and then we put all kinds of methods in place to make these departments work without this idea that you are really working on one machine. If you really think about maybe if you go one more level further, most companies are designed or evolve into design, or they're designed to run. They're not designed to change or build. We are very, very good. Every training, everything that we do is designed, okay, how are you going to operate? How are you going to do something? But we don't really have this muscle of how do I change this machine, this enterprise machine? And so we're not designed that way. So now that is where the waste starts. And so if you take it enterprise thinking, thinking of your entire company as one machine, and then thinking of all these different capabilities as components become really important. Then you say, how do I make sure these components interrelate and interoperate? And that's where the next level of behavior is. To do that, I need consistency of practice, I need domain mastery, etc. Otherwise, I won't be able to do it. And all this results in one big, big, big waste, which is around decision making. Collective decision making is the biggest waste in most organizations. And I call it decision waste. That's what creates all this waste. So, what we were trying to do was, and digital academy and building this digital army was just one of the many techniques, by the way. So as you said that you did not know about this before, there are many such elements that made it that transformation successful. But this became the cornerstone. And to the extent, Alan, when we started the transformation, kind of once we kind of established the framework, broader framework for the bigger transformation. So it was by 2019, January, and so we knew that we are going to take a slightly different path on this transformation. But one of the things that I did at that time, or we did collectively at the time, was we started this digital academy first. So before we even started the technology transformation and the business transformation, we said we are going to establish the foundation for behavior transformation. And to me, if I reflect back on what gave us the success that we're talking about, where we were able to build a completely new auto finance business, all the capabilities, hundreds of systems, and launched the first private label business with Mazda Financial Services on Toyota's platform. And it was all done in less than a year. I think there are many things we can talk about that drove that success, but the biggest piece was that we focused on behavior transformation and shaping of behaviors first, even before we started to implement the technology aspects of things.
So just to clarify though, this digital academy, right? Um, it's not just a training department, right? What made this digital academy that you created fundamentally different than, just normal learning and development efforts at most companies?
Yeah, great question. And that was, this is again, I think maybe over the years of doing this and observing this, uh, One of the challenges that I used to always have thinking about this concept was most of our programs are designed around what I call as training. Like we will have trainers come from outside training about things. And to me, that felt very transactional. And what we were trying to do was something transformational. And in a way that becomes part of our life. And and that's in that moment I started to realize I think our focus needs to be on teaching, not training. And there's a subtle difference in this. Training is transactional, teaching is more of a mindset. And the part of that was next thing that I was as we were thinking about this was to say our leaders in every company, every manager, every leader is expected to coach and mentor. So teaching is actually a part of our expectation, but there is no real framework, no real kind of a platform by which we can activate this teaching energy that people have and should have in the organization. And that was different. So what we did was we said, okay, instead of bringing experts from outside trying to train us on what, say, information security is, or what, say, treasury management is, or how to run a call center operations, shouldn't it be our own leaders and managers who are expert in that subject, not only expert in the subject, they're expert in the subject in our context, because it's about our way. So what if they are the ones who are teaching the rest of the organization? So we are teaching ourselves, our own teams, right? And so in that context, what we said, we created Academy, which was a physical space, and plus it has a digital element to it also. And that was created more as a tangible way of describing what this framework will, how this framework will work. And then we asked all our leaders means almost top from the top of the organization down, to be part of this academy as the teacher. So they will come and they will teach. The question was, do I have to prepare the content? Then you get into the mechanics of it, right? This is a lot of work. Who's going to do this and that? And we basically said, don't worry about it. All you have to do is show up there and present to this group as if you're presenting to someone who just joined your team, your department's team. So if someone joins a treasury management team, how do you orient them about what is that you do? That's all you have to do. You don't have to build any new content, nothing. So we asked the teachers, and it was a very organic, it was an organic process. And the teachers and also leaders and the managers. And another thing that I used to ask everyone was, in addition to your current responsibility, what is it? What is your mastery? What are you really, really good at? You must be good at something. That's why you are in this position. And typically they will reveal some of their mastery. And then we'll say, can you also teach that to others? So the idea was to multiply this mastery that we already have in our organization. And the beauty of this, Alan, is it's no incremental cost,
Yeah,
right?
so you said in your paper that you implemented something you called a Teach 100. Uh, it's a technique that you implemented that scales up without more budget, without more headcount. Um, you know, just give us an example. How did this really work?
So it's a in a profound way, it's actually simple. The simple thing is that we asked all our team members, all our managers especially, and my directs, that we are going to all have this goal of what we call as Teach 100. You'll teach 100 hours a year, which is about, on an average, 2 hours a week.
Yeah.
Not a lot, right? So we said 2 hours a week on an average, we're going to teach. That becomes our goal, which was to activate this idea that teaching is part of our responsibility. And not only teaching the part of responsibility for our own teams, teaching to the rest of the organization, not just IT, entire organization. Whether they are consultants, employees, it doesn't matter. If there are workers who are working on our business and our technology, then they will follow, they will go through the same process of learning. And our managers and our leaders become the teachers. And so it was beautiful because what happened was it had this, which even I didn't even think about it when we were thinking, we were putting this all together. And it started to blossom and grow almost little in an uncontrolled way. Because what happened is it started to activate something that I never really thought about, which was it started to activate pride in people. The leaders and managers, they started to carry a badge which says, I teach, for example. So this idea that I am teaching, I know this topic, and I'm contributing to growing other people. I'm contributing to growing this mastery in this organization. And all this is happening without any external support. We are just doing it internally. And it got to a point where team members would come and they will make a request. They will say, can I teach? And that's when you knew that you have just unleashed something that is going to just grow on its own. And I think that is where you start to see this transformation in a way among people's behaviors. Not only that, it was not just about the academy, even the practices that we were putting in place. We had completely new set of digital engineering practices. They started to gain more momentum because people started to believe in those practices as well.
So yeah, so getting back to the distinction you made between training as transactional and teaching is transformational, it sounds like by focusing on teaching and having all the leaders participate, you gave people a sense of achievement, a sense of pride. They also started communicating in groups and learning the common ways that people worked, and just and basically you impacted the whole culture, if am understanding correctly.
That's correct. I think collectively, once we got into this, it started to impact the culture. Culture is basically behaviors and habits. It started to form new habits, right? And that's exactly what we were trying to do. You asked earlier about scaling. This is the way to scale because we can't say develop a method which we built. We built a methodology that was documented in 300-page playbook, but if you just give someone the playbook and say, from this point onwards, you have to follow these principles, you have to follow these architectural guidelines, you have to follow this new agile methodology, or whatever, that's not how, or even if you train them, that's not how you can scale, because some people will get it, some won't. But to really scale it in a way that it becomes part of your way of working, this is how it kind of activated that teaching, the pride, and getting kind of involved in it. And you are basically shaping the behaviors, not just basically just telling how to behave. And I think that started to change and that started to create the scale. And all this uh, you start like for example, if we had organized our teams in what we called as factories or digital factories. Every factory has to follow the same practices, and not only IT people, even non-IT or the business team members, they have to, because it can't work just within the IT context. So they all have to follow these practices. So we have to make sure that whatever we were doing, this teaching and the learning kind of platform that we had created, it was designed for everyone.
Right.
Everyone, consultants, employees, employees on the IT side, employees on the non-IT side. And one of the big elements was, and this was a guiding principle, that this was not about training, or this was not about even teaching one individual. It was about always teaching the teams. So everything was done in cohorts. And the cohorts were these factory teams. So if there is a team which is focused around, say, lending, then everyone around lending was always together in these learning sessions, if you will. And that was also important because traditionally, what happens is when we have these learning and development programs or training programs, we ask people to enroll. Everyone is trying to do it individually. We have kind of made it as an individual responsibility. You have to learn, you have to figure it out yourself, which is great, which has its own merit. But beyond that, what if we actually bring them as a team? Because that's the problem that we were trying to solve. Going back to what I said earlier, biggest waste happens in inter cross functional interface points, right? So to solve that, we have to bring them always together. So we are saying lending is one domain, and everyone related to the domain. It doesn't matter whether you are in call center, whether you are in risk management, whether you're in finance, whether you're in IT, wherever you are, you're going to be all together in one learning session. And what it did was it also helped build the chemistry among them. And it took away this mystery and misunderstanding that people have. Somehow, if we are all part of one team, but we attend 5 different training sessions, as if each one got something different from it. But here we were all sitting together. So
Yeah,
that
and so this
misunderstanding was.
yeah, so this digital academy of yours, I mean, basically, if I understand it correctly, I mean, it's not super complicated. You allocated a physical space, you had a digital platform and a small organizing team. So you put the elements in place and then it just kind of snowballed. Do I
That's
understand?
right. That's a very simple way to kind of describe it. That's exactly what happened. It wasn't like a big initiative. It wasn't like some big tracking of learning and development hours. And actually, one of the questions that used to come was, will we get any kind of formal certification through this? And I said, no, that's the whole idea. I don't want you to do this for certification.
Right.
You have to have the desire to learn this topic because you're part of the team, because it's going to make you a much better practitioner of that domain. That's the reason. Certification, in my view, would have taken us back to the whole training style, which is then I'm just doing it because I'll have few certificates and I can post it on my wall and look good on my resume. But that's not the intention. Intention was to really truly build the mastery and consistency of practices.
All right, so I got one more question for you, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. So you're making a good case for treating education as a core business strategy. So what shift, if you were going to advise CIOs or CEOs how to activate this at their company, how would you do it? What shift would you tell them to focus on?
Yeah, number one, for CIOs, I think I believe that as a CIO, we have a responsibility to lift the digital proficiency and AI proficiency of the entire organization, not just IT. We have to really, if we are the CIO of the company, of the enterprise, then we are also the ones responsible for and accountable for lifting the digital proficiency. Someone else is not going to do it. We have to do it. So that's just one. And the second piece is this is for all executives, in my view, irrespective of what our purview is education has to become a core part of our strategy. Most
Hmm.
of the times, most of the strategies, whether they're business strategies, HR strategies, technology strategies, what you'll find is there's an overemphasis around talent acquisition. And we hear a lot about this also, right? Talent acquisition. We need to go hire and get more talent. But reality is we can solve the real gap or the in skills and proficiency only so much with the new talent acquisition. We still have 80 to 90% of the talent that is legacy talent. Just like we're doing legacy system modernization, legacy business modernization, we have to also do legacy talent modernization. And that should be part of our strategy, part of our day-to-day work, right? So in that context, education becomes an important part of this strategy. I deliberately use the word education because it's not just training, it's not just giving people platform to learn or taking them through these training that you have to have just because that's the only way you can do work, but fundamentally creating education as part of your strategy and a culture. So one of the, I'll give you a simple framework. This is what we did. We used to always use kind of four objectives or four, let's call it broad objectives: grow the business or grow, run, innovate, transform. These were the typical. You grow, you run, you innovate, transform. We
Hmm.
actually changed and added E to it, and we called it educate. And it became a nice little acronym for us. We called it TRIGGER. That was our strategy: transform, innovate, grow, educate, run. And that was fundamentally just our framework for our strategy that we had established. And what that did was, because those five elements were now starting from the top, now everyone has to think about, oh, what are they delivering on education? So education became an actually measurable criteria for strategy, not just a soft expectation from the leaders. And to me, I think that is the shift that needs to happen. That education has to become core part of a strategy. And because even the new talent that we will acquire in 9 months, 12 months, they are becoming legacy talent, right? So we have to have a way to even educate them. And so that's the advice I'll give to CIOs and the CXOs.
Sounds good. All right, let's open it up to audience questions. If you want to ask a question, you can go to React and then raise your hand. There's a little raise hand button when you click on React. So, but while people are doing that, the first question is in the chat, and I see Amar. We'll get to you second. Harold, do you want to come? Um, you want to voice your question, or you want me just to read it?
I can voice it if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, excellent. I love the idea, by the way. We went through a similar process when Harvey Golub came to Minneapolis and transformed what was IDS into American Express Financial Advisors. And it was a cultural change as much as anything else. But I also love the idea of people learning their craft best by teaching it. It
Mhm.
actually instills a deeper understanding in you as the teacher. But I was curious about what kind of opportunity, or the flip side, I guess, would be onus was placed on employees in these various processes to actually attend these training sessions, and what of their work time was allowed or dedicated to that.
Yeah, great question. And we thought about that quite a bit, and we decided that we are not going to put any onus on the employees. It's going to be fully volunteer or voluntary participation by them. And the idea was that I think, again, I was going with this idea that this cannot be a forced behavior. If we are really shaping the behavior, if that's our intention, that we want to shape these behaviors, then we have to let people, we have to just create the environment, and that environment will shape the behaviors and let people actually follow and kind of that environment. And this is something uh, I drew from 30 plus years back. Is one of our professors actually he mentioned this, and he draw on this whiteboard this picture. He says people don't change because we are all adults. Our wiring happened when we were 10 years old or so. And then he draws another circle and he says, but beauty is that people conform to the environment. So if you really want to change people and their behaviors, define the environment first, because people will conform to the environment, and then naturally the behaviors will change. So I applied that philosophy here. I said, if I try to make this as a forced concept and a process, I think it will start to follow the same old style learning and development training sessions. Here it was, here's the framework, here is a platform, and here is what we're trying to do. I used to spend a lot of time talking about what we are trying to do, not the learning part. The trying to do part is the transformation. This is what we're going to do. For that, we're going to have new kind of practices, and all of us will have to learn those practices. And for that, we have created this academy, and all our leaders and managers are ready to teach us. So now it's up to you if you want to go and attend the class. And you know what was, Harold, interesting was that never was a problem, actually. We never had an issue where people were not engaged in the learning process, and they were actually quite active. It was just kind of a self-fulfilling process. And once in a while, there will be some teams, they have other priorities and they're not able to do it. And we used to understand that and to let the managers figure it out and let them see how that works for their team. But to answer a question very directly, there was no direct expectation from the team members or any kind of a forced structure that was put for them. The only soft structure that we put was that every leader, and that also the leaders who were in my direct team, saying we are going to have a self-defined goal that we are going to teach 100 hours a year. That was not part of the formal performance criteria. It was just a goal that we had chosen for ourselves.
Thanks, Vipin. The next question is from Amar. Do you want to unmute yourself?
You, Alan. Thank you, Bipin. In fact, Bipin, you answered one of my questions, which is good. But what we do very similar to, I wouldn't call this a formal academy. We call them more like cross department, cross domain, cross technology, knowledge sharing sessions. So that's something which we practice. The challenge which I see, and probably your academy or your playbook or your framework might help us. The challenge we see is one that how do you keep track of, you know, a schedule, agenda, topic of interest, right? That sort of thing, right? From each of the leaders, right? Sometimes, so that becomes a bit of challenge for us. So we have the way we have handled is we have one day in a week, set 1 hour, and that is where we have open slots for people to come and join, right? So there's no force, sort of any measurement there, but people come and join, and then we pick the session informally. There's no formality, right? But what I have seen happening with us is we deviate on various topics, right? So how do you really arrange them such a way, as you said, 100 hours per year each leader has to spend, let's say, or certain hours. That is where we see a challenge, and I would really want to hear from you, Vipin. How do you manage that challenge, and is that the right approach? What we are doing is aligned to your digital academy?
Yeah, yeah. Let me describe what we did, and I think what you're describing makes a lot of sense, and I think there's a way to kind of evolve it naturally. So it's a combination of two things. The combination of what you described as what you're doing, and plus one more idea that we applied, and this is again based on some other reflections I've had over the years. The idea is you build mastery through intensity. So what we did was we deliberately created the program, and it was initially we called it a boot camp. It was a 4-day program deliberately, which is you have to take people out of what they're doing and really immerse them into this what we call as a boot camp. And there was a clearly defined uh, kind of agenda and a routine for those 4 days, and who's going to participate in structure. That was all kind of part of that whole calendar and structure building. And then, as Alan mentioned very briefly, that we did have a physical space, we did have a platform, software platform to run all this, but we also had a small team. And that team was just what I'll call as the best way to describe the team was that team was matchmaking team. All it was doing was understanding who are the teachers and we and what are the programs that we want to and what are the programs that they're bringing, and then they will put a calendar for it. And the calendar, when they were designing the calendar, and that's where the art is. When we were designing the calendar, we used to design and shape the calendar in a way that will influence more of a group learning rather than individual learning only. And then there were obviously elements where we will had individual learning as well. So it's a multi kind of approach, multi framework approach that you took. But what made the biggest difference for us was the idea of creating intense learning opportunities, and then combined it with, I would call it more like what you described, which is you have a calendar of activities, people are coming together, it's kind of an open session, and you continue to drive it that way also. And frankly, we also later on added some external training in the sense there were like, for example, in today's context, it'll be something related to AI. At that time, there was a topic specifically related to cloud operations. So we said, okay, we don't have expertise for cloud operations, so we'll bring the trainer from outside. So it's a at the end of the day, it's a hybrid approach with a lot of overemphasis around teaching, a lot of overemphasis around group learning, and emphasis around this intensity, create this intense moments where people can actually go deep and focused around just learning.
Makes sense. Thank you, Vipin.
All right, next up is Pat Hubble. Pat, do you want to unmute?
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. So good to see you, Vipin. I really appreciate this. So you've given a lot of great points. You've talked about various ways that people are encouraged to do this. Sometimes I find that there are creative incentives that are used. Perhaps you didn't have anything in particularly creative, but I'd love to know if you have just some things that happen in the background or some things that are not typical that helped this be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, creative incentive. The most creative incentive that we came up was with this idea of badge that we had, which was this that everyone could, if you teach in your Outlook picture, you can add a badge around it which says I teach. And the cheapest incentive maybe, but it was extremely effective because what happened was not only it demonstrated or showed a sense of pride that the person had in doing this, but then that created more teachers. And that's all we were trying to do. If we can create more teachers, we had enough students, we wanted to just create more teachers and the culture of teaching, and then just started to grow from there. We really did not have any material incentives or any performance incentives for anyone, except for this idea that we will publicly recognize you as a teacher.
Public recognition is a great incentive. Thanks, Vipin.
All right, Vipin, it's 12:15 and I am mindful of the clock for you, but let's pull in one more question from Irving Vladowski Berger, and then we'll begin the close down and let you go. Irving.
So, Vipin, it's so nice to see you and hear about your experiences. As you can tell, I've been around for a while, and I have now lived through three major technology revolutions. First was the computer revolution, and I worked at IBM, and IBM was the leader of the computer revolution in the 70s, 80s. But then the world changed. The technology totally changed from proprietary to standards. The internet came along, and that great culture IBM had built all of a sudden was a handicap. And the old management team was unable to adjust. So new management came in, Lou Gerstner, whatever. And that was the internet revolution that came, and it was totally different. And now we're facing another major revolution. We're in the early stages, the AI revolution, and we don't know how it's going to work out. We don't know what are going to be the key things. So what do you see as needing to lead and well, first of all, to survive, let alone lead, and then lead in the emerging AI revolution?
Yeah, Aaron, great question. Thank you for that. So this is how I think, which is true for all these different technologies. I think part of this is, so one is the individuals, and then in this context, we're talking about the organizations as well. So this is a new skill that we have to learn. This is not only new skill, new way of working, new mindset, a lot of things are going to happen around this, I think. So what it does is, to me, it overemphasizes this idea that education has to be part of your strategy, has to be part of it. Like you just cannot avoid it. There is, so I think as educational institutions, I think we are all part of that as well. It is hard to keep pace with the change that is taking place. So we cannot expect, we means the corporations cannot expect that this gap will be filled by educational institutions. We have to take the responsibility and the accountability of doing that. So if I am a corporation doesn't have an education strategy and education platform, we are going to be always finding ourselves handicapped in our ability to keep pace with this change. Because the biggest competitive advantage a company has, any company, business small or large, is their ability to change. And they can only change as fast as their people can change. So I think it goes back to the human element and how do we make sure that even whether it's AI or whatever the next revolution is going to come, how do we make this kind of education as part of that strategy so that we can keep pace with it and we can make our people agile? And people will be agile when they have the mastery and skills, the consistency of practice, etc. If they are agile, the company is going to be agile, the business is going to be agile. I think so. It becomes really, really, from that perspective, I think even more important because this human element is going to make the difference. That's why I think the title of our conversation here is The Future Will Be Won by the Companies That Will Have the Best Digital Army of People, not just agents or AI agents, right? So it's the people that are going to make the difference.
So, Vipin, it is 12:19. There are a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to just read them and address them very quickly, and then we'll begin to close up.
Yeah. So, Alan, I can take this one. I think the first one, which is again, Harold, it is how achievable would this be in today's hybrid work environment?
Hmm.
Well, this is actually great. So we started this in 2019, and we all know what happened in 2020. So we were forced into a hybrid environment at the time. So Harold, it was great. Actually, this worked out so well in this hybrid environment because what happened was now not only because we had kind of a basic, very basic digital platform. Again, we didn't really need any learning platform or big delivery platform. All it was really a SharePoint based site that we had established with all the content that is available and the curation that used to go behind the scenes. And the key was for us to just use that digital platform or the simple digital platform, and that became a way to kind of continue to do what we were doing, but in a digital sense. And it worked beautifully in that case. We didn't know at the time. We did not know how it will work. But and not only that, what it did was when we were doing this in the first phase, it was largely focused with our US team, US based team. And because of COVID and when it all became really digital, accessible, other countries, the Board of Financial Services in other countries, their teams started to actually get access to it. And they started to benefit from this as well. And so it started to go beyond just the US boundaries, it started to go global. And again, it was happening a little bit organically on its own. So it actually worked much better in the hybrid environment because it is not limited to people being face to face. It was all about kind of bringing the right content and bringing that right energy from the leaders of the organization and showing up in front of the teams of the organization. And that also, by the way, we didn't talk about this, that also created a very interesting chemistry. When the team members at the lowest levels of the organization see the highest levels of the organization or the members of the highest level of the organization dedicating their time to teach, it creates a different kind of a respect both ways. I think that was another impact that we had.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and Vipin, just one more thing. Do you have to do anything to train the teachers to bring forward consistency and professionalism in the teaching, or you just let people do it their own way?
Yeah, we did actually had the need to do it. I think everyone showed up, just like leaders and managers would in most organizations. They're already trained to do that in a way, to show up in the right way. And because it was their teams and not just their teams, it was a broader team. So everyone, I think, was naturally in that kind of consistent pattern. We didn't really have to do much. And I think that's the other thing. If you bring someone from outside, then you have to adjust them to kind of set into your framework. In this case, it was not needed because it was like it started to feel like just series of many town halls being stitched together, if that makes sense, right? So that's how the leaders showed up. They were just going in front of the team and they were showing and sharing their expertise. And in the process, they were building relationships and chemistry with the team and breaking down these kind of barriers that are across the layers. All that was working beautifully. So we didn't
Yeah,
really over-engineer this thing. We just let it flow.
got it. All right. Well, so I know you're passionate about this subject, no doubt about that. So can you leave us with a call to action for everybody in the audience? What belief do you think people should shift, or what habits should they start? What should everybody do to kind of bring this into practice in their own organization?
Yeah, so if I had to say this, I think I would again go back to a little bit what I said earlier, but the idea is that we are all in this business, and part of the biggest challenge that we all face is not transformation. Technology transformation is actually not that difficult, relatively speaking. It's the transformation of people's behaviors and habits. It doesn't matter whether it's small business, big business, we are all doing this at whatever level we are. And my point is, if you want to really change that behavior and habits at scale, then we have to create an environment. And you create the environment, people will conform to that environment. And part of that environment, as you design that environment, make teaching and this learning as part of that environment, as if like core DNA of that environment. using some of the techniques that we mentioned today, I think that's going to go a long, long, long way. And if you go back and reflect on whether your own company, when they were successful or they were at the peak of their success, or any other company that we see as successful, you'll invariably find it is largely because how they were able to shape behaviors and habits through these kind of techniques, whether they're learning, training, or whatever you call it. And I think to me, education has to be part of your strategy. It is absolutely paramount. And I think that's what I will leave you with, Alan.
Well, Vipin, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I just want to thank you again for supporting the symposium and supporting our new online series. It's great to have you. And we'll let you know as soon as the recording is published. And everybody in the audience, thanks for joining us. As I said, we have 2 more summer series sessions, and then we have a full agenda in September. Join us for all of it. But for now, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.